Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. Um, Today, we're talking, first of all, about the question of are indie writers forced to be lone wolves, or are we allowed to team up in a pack? And as Richard just said before we started this, the fact that the four of us are here suggests that we team up in a pack, but we can discuss some ideas on this. So, Richard, it has wolves. Go for it.
Yeah, and just like real wolves, I think the lone wolf is more of the exception to the norm. Wolves are very pack related. I think indie authors are too. My experience has been that, at least in online social media, et cetera, that indie authors do tend to cluster together and share a lot of our experiences. And like we said, this particular meaning that we do on a regular basis is proof of that. I think sometimes, in fact, I'm trying to think when an indie author is out there alone, that must be awfully difficult because you're trying to deal with issues like how to self-publish, how to advertise your stuff, and all without input. Even when I first started and I wasn't planning to be like a full indie author, I just put something up there mostly for my friends. I thought nobody would ever buy it or read it. Once someone did, first thing I did was contacted a friend who's a graphic artist. She had a friend who had already published, did independent publishing, and I asked him a bunch of questions. So if there are indie authors out there who are truly lone wolves, well, that's quite a feat. You know, I wish you the best too. But if you ever feel like you need information or answers to questions, reach out because indie authors are extremely accommodating on their experiences. So I was,
I'll follow up with that from the point of view that I joined several Facebook groups when I first started, and I did a lot more interaction then than I do now, I've got to admit. But they were just amazing. I mean, having run my own business for several years in the media, there was always competition in lurking in the background. You'd know somebody was possibly about to make a presentation for a worldwide um, conference or whatever. And you keep quiet about it because you would put in gosh, I'm losing all my words. You'd put in a quote for it and all the rest of it with specs and such like, but you didn't tell anybody because they just might, right, um, be a jump ahead of you. But when it comes to writing books, we're basically not in competition with each other. We're incredibly supportive. We know that once we've written a book and we've sold it, we're not going to sell it 15 million times to the same reader. So really, I think, yes, I do feel that they've been incredibly supportive to me. And if ever I have a question, I put it on and somebody will come up. In fact, one perfect example, and I'm really quite proud of this one. I wrote a book and I put my heroine into California, and I'd never been there, right? So I went on Google Earth and I had a look, and I walked up and down Los Angeles, and I had a good look. But when I mentioned it to somebody who lives in California, she said, "Hang on, I live here. I know the area. I'll find the best possible place that you could put such and such a scenario in." And bless her, she did. She told me how far it was, what the road was like, what the terrain was like. And it wasn't on Google Maps because it was way out in the middle of nowhere. And I was just bowled over. She was just amazing. So yeah, they were incredibly helpful to each other.
yeah, you also raise a good point because you're right. In other fields, sometimes like, or even if you're published, you have to be careful of what ideas you have, what your concept you want to push forward is because someone can easily just say, I'm gonna, I have the concept ahead of you and then get in. But with indie publishing, we don't have a gate. And there's pros and cons to that. We've talked about that in the past. But since we don't have a gate, I could tell you exactly what I'm planning for my next book. And if you went out and wrote that idea, it would be a completely different book because we're different people. And there is no, well, he has that, I can't have it. There's no publisher saying, well, we already have that. Yours is too similar. No, it can go out there as concepts are similar, but then readers would be different, and the way you write it would be different. So there really isn't that have to watch over your back. In fact, the only time I'm a little reticent about projects I have planned is simply because I may not be delivering them. And I hate to tell people, oh, my next project is whatever, because as you all know, sometimes it never makes it out the door. So I don't want to let people down. Anyway, go on. I'm
I
sorry.
have a half a dozen projects just like that.
We all do.
So I was thinking when we first start writing, we are loners. But I think there's just something inherent in if you seek to publish what you're writing, you have to become a part of a community. You can't continue to be a lone wolf after you publish something because you're now out there.
Right.
And I mean, I know when I was first started writing, for the first 10 years, I wrote. I There was an online writer's website called Toasted Cheese. It's still around, but I participated in discussions there and I submitted a few short stories, but I didn't engage with local writers very much at all. But the more I publish, the more I do this, the more I realize, yeah, that there's a community, and you can't publish effectively if you're not a part of a community, whether it's getting editing help or beta reading help or critiques while you're writing it or whatever. It's a community effort.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're writing, or as I did, I wrote most of my life just to write, not to publish. But when you're writing, you're right. That is a solitary effort more times than not. But it's the becoming the indie publisher part of the
Yeah.
equation, where that moves you over that line into, well, I'm gonna need, I can do better by getting input. Not that you may even need that input, you may not feel that, but by getting it, you can be better, whether it's beta reading or, as I said, experiences about publishing and or advertising, et cetera. All of that is worth reaching out to learn about.
I know at this point I don't publish anything unless I have a few people read it before I publish it, just to make sure that I didn't didn't completely miss the boat or something like that.
They're also very good. Well, I call them my online friends because being in Spain, there are two or three authors around, but not much. And of course, we haven't got a huge population who speaks English. So, I mean, those doors are partially closed to me. But when you do publish something, they do tell their friends. They do. They're very supportive. They'll go in and they'll review. Not always, I mean, but very. But they will, and it just they're just supportive. What else can I say? I think they're amazing.
Actually, we have a question coming up about beta readers, don't we, on the
Yeah,
list?
I was going to transition to that once we're
Yeah,
done.
I think you have.
Well, Bertold, did you have anything on the? You're a lone wolf, aren't you?
Well, so I was thinking about just to play devil's advocate. How could you be a lone wolf as a writer? I mean, I guess you could. So you write the book yourself. You even design the cover. You do all that stuff on your own, and then you put it out there and publish it, and you basically just leave it there. And there are some books, as if you read my blog, you know that I like to find weird off the beaten path books. There are some I've come across on Amazon where I feel like that's basically what happened. Somebody wrote this thing and they just put it out there and that was it. They made no effort to promote it or to tell anyone that it was there. And it can be kind of interesting when you find something like that. And I would certainly say that you get unusual books that way. But at the same time, I don't think I'm not sure why you would go to all the trouble of even publishing it at that point. If you want to be a true lone wolf, wouldn't you be content to just be like? And there are some authors who are like this, just write something and they don't even care if it gets published or not. They're like, I wrote it. I'm happy I wrote it. It doesn't need to go up anywhere. Actually, Mark, I could be wrong, but I think our friend Kevin Brennan has sort of started going this route to some degree. But um,
I think he's grown tired of publishing and not having any
yeah, if
much
you're
of an
not,
audience.
I can see if you don't get, and certainly his
Yep.
work. By the way, anyone out there, Kevin Brennan, look him up. You should read his books; they're fantastic.
Yes.
But yes, if someone is not getting readers, you might say, why bother going through the whole publishing thing? So, I mean, it's interesting the idea of someone who just writes purely to write with no interest in it finding an audience other than themselves. But I think, again, the fact that we're here suggests that most people sort of want someone to read it, right? And if you want someone to read it, by the nature, you're going to have to be a non lone wolf, at least to a degree.
Right.
I have met a lot of people who have written a book, but it's not for everybody from the point of view that they publish it. Obviously, they put it up to get it in paperback form, or they might even go direct to a publisher because they just want it for family and friends, finished and proud, no more than that. So, as I say, I've met quite a few people that said, "Oh no, I wouldn't want to put it out there in the marketplace or anything like that," which is probably how we feel when we first put something up and thinking nobody's going to buy this at all. So yeah, there's a certain slice of the market who are doing it for a personal family reason.
Going back to Kevin Brennan, I think his most recent blog posts about whatever it is that he's been working on has specifically said, knowing that he's not going to publish it, has basically freed him up to write something he probably never would have written before. So all I can say is, if you know Kevin Brennan, if you follow Kevin Brennan, put pressure on him to publish that story.
Well, I almost feel like, again, I've mentioned this in the past, what your goals are, but I almost feel like if you just want to write and you just, you know, want, and maybe even one or two other people to read it. I mean, I'm just saying, if you don't want it, people to ever read it ever, that's one thing. But if just feel like I've written it and I wouldn't mind one or two people, why not put it out there? You don't have to have, hundreds of people reading it. Since in today's day and age, you can do it for free. You just,
Yep.
hit a button and I know in the past, before, self-publishing is as it is now, you had to go find a vanity publisher, et cetera, and it was expensive. But now it's just, well, I mean, because that was pretty much my experience. I created a book for the sole purpose of doing an actual book, beginning to end, cover to cover, because I said, oh, I could do this for free. But I never expected anything more than my friends or family to read it. And then, like, it was the week one, somebody, I still don't know who that person was, read it and loved it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So as I always said, I went in and got rid of many mistakes as I could, and there's still plenty, uh, but there were a lot because I didn't care before. Anyway, but you could do it just to push of a button, so why not? You know.
I subscribe to a blog called Beatley Pete, right? Because he lives in Lincolnshire. And he has a daily serial of about 800 words. And I read them every day. And they're stories, about 21 episodes, if you like, of 800 words, whatever the maths that is. And I've often thought to myself, don't do this, Pete, because although you've got 4,000 followers on your blog, your stories are so good, they should have a wider audience. But I've hung back because I don't want him to do it into books because I enjoy his daily read, and I think he might stop doing that. But they are excellent stories. He's a brilliant writer. He used to be a taxi driver. He used to be an ambulance man in London. I think he was in the police as well. I'm not sure, but he's just got this gift, and his stories are really, really good. So
This should be very easy to just compile into a book of.
exactly, yeah.
Published
I
what
mean,
he's
you've got
already
them there.
Right,
keep doing what he's doing, but publish what he's already done.
right,
I
and
think
do
I
it in
think he should.
volumes. Yeah,
Because they're clever stories, and there's usually a twist at the end you're just not expecting. And I think I can see every twist coming, but I don't with his. which is quite rare.
Okay, ready for so beta readers. The way this was written was listen to your beta readers since they give time for free. And I don't necessarily just because they give time for free that means I have to listen to them. I value the time and their willingness to do it, but I always think you listen to beta readers as long as what they're suggesting is either consistent with what your vision of the story was, or it will improve what you've done. And I mean, I can tell you with my last novella that was just published, one beta reader whose initials are BG absolutely loved the story, and my other beta reader absolutely hated it. And she hated it. I mean, she admitted that it was the wrong genre for her. She just doesn't like the genre. But she also hated it for reasons that I'm confident some readers will hate it for. So nothing she said was groundbreaking to me. It was entirely consistent with how I think some readers will read it. So I don't know how the rest of you feel about beta readers and how much you pay attention to what they say.
Well,
I don't have.
Go ahead. No, you go.
No, you go first. You go first.
All right. So I was just going to say I've been on both sides of this. I've given people stuff of mine to read, and they come back with critiques and suggestions and various reactions. And again, you say, I appreciate you taking the time. Sometimes I think, wow, that's a really great thing they suggested. I never thought of it. And I change the book based on that. Other times I go, no, that's not what I want to do. Like a more concrete example, I had somebody once tell me, oh, you should start your story off with this action scene, and then that occurs in like the middle of the story as I had written it, and then the rest is like a flashback. So you start off with a bang, because that's what is typically called for in publishing. They sort of recommend starting the story off with a bang. And I mean, the suggestion makes sense. I see why they said that, but I'm like, that's not how I want to tell the story, so I'm not going to do that. That's it's a logical suggestion, but it's just not what I want. But I've taken other suggestions, certainly, and I've been in the position as well of being a beta reader where I made a suggestion to someone, and he basically said, well, it's an interesting idea. I see why you said that, but I don't like that. That's not my style, so I'm not going to do it. And I totally respect that. At the end of the day, it's the author's story to do with as they see fit. I think absolutely you should have beta readers because they may suggest something you never thought of, but never feel like you have to do what they say because they're beta readers. It's your story. Go ahead, Lucinda.
I don't use them at all. I'm very envious of writers who say, oh, my husband read this and we went through it chapter by chapter. The only time I've managed to pin my other half down to say, please read it, we had this long discussion about, but she hasn't been to the loo or book. And I said, well, I don't want her going to the loo. She's a nice young lady. I don't want her peeing next to some Land Rover in the middle of the African bush. I also feel that I do have an editor. I have a professional editor, so hopefully that covers it. But I feel that I'm never sure that anybody's going to give you the actual truth, and they're going to be that honest. And I don't think it's necessarily because I've been writing for over 40 years professionally. I mean, but they seem to be sort of, oh, well, I mustn't criticize anything because, I mean, I've tried once or twice. And they just saw it's brilliant, perfect, it's great, etc., etc. And I'm thinking, no, there's got to be something wrong with it, really. At the same time, I don't tend to beta read for other people either, because it's a very delicate line. I mean, I do review professionally. I don't know these authors. I can be honest, gentle and kind, I hope, but be honest. But if somebody I know says, please, will you read my book? I generally sort of, and check it, or you should read it. I generally say, no thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to lose a friendship over it.
I think you raise a good point about beta readers and what it is you want as a writer from your beta readers. Um, I'm trying to remember what the rest of my thought was. um, I basically, when I my beta readers are not my friends anymore. Friends from real life. You know what I mean?
I know
Okay.
There are
what you
people
mean.
like we're told and other writers that I've met
I was gonna say
genuinely.
I'm
The
hurt,
minute
Mark.
I parsed that as your beta readers, you drop this friends, but I get you don't use your friends as beta readers.
I just completely lost my train of thought when I started talking, and I'm trying to get it back. But like, my family and friends, I don't necessarily use them as beta readers anymore. Bertold, I've known enough. He's a friend of mine, but I'm talking about, kind of like I said, the home circle. I don't use them anymore because they do exactly what you said, Lucinda. They say, "Oh, it was great. I loved it." Okay, that doesn't do anything for me. So I generally use beta readers who are other writers and readers who I know will at least give me some honest feedback. And because the I loved it, it was great, does absolutely nothing for me. So,
Interestingly, I'm just going to interject here that people often say don't use family members as beta readers because they will
yep.
just say be nice about it, and that's probably true in most cases. For me personally, I will just say the most ruthless beta reader I have is my mother. I'll give something out that everybody else likes, and she's like, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad. Oh, you need to take care of this." So, but
this 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 was my
go
this
ahead.
was my parents too. My parents were the same way. When I wrote my first novel and I shared it with them, they did everything they could to tear me down and rip me up and spit me out, and
They
but it
were
didn't stop
terrified you were going to starve in an attic, were they?
me. Say that again.
Were they terrified you were going to starve in an attic and not get a proper job?
No, no. By then I had a proper job. This was a sideline. But no, it's just, yeah, my parents were definitely, but my dad was a writer. My mom was his typist back in the day when there weren't computers and you had to hand type a manuscript, and she also probably was a brutal editor of his work as well. I mean, it just, that was what they did. They wrote, they read, they edited, and that's one of the reasons why I gave that first novel to them, was to hear get something honest, and they definitely provided it. So
Um, for me, I was at one point of my life a significant chunk user interface designer, and it was the thing that taught me more than anything else how to take my ego and throw it out of the house, the room, whatever, because you will not succeed as a user interface designer if you don't have people attempt to use your design and point out the flaws or where they're having difficulty or et cetera, et cetera. It is the path to success to be able to say, tell me what's wrong, not tell me what you like. I mean, you can ask that, but the more important thing for you is to make sure. However, in terms of that, as a user interface designer, I was creating a product. Well, I worked in a company that was putting out a product, and you want the product to succeed. So it's not really it's your design, but it's not your product. You want the best responses on it, but you don't have the right to say, you know what, that person is right, but it clashes with my vision. You can't do that. But as a writer, you can. So I do feel I need to have beta readers only because of my experience. But it is true. I will read what they have and very often say to myself, that's a good point, but it will ruin something else that I'm trying to do here. Or on the flip side, they have suggested things that I thought, sure, why not? If that helps, like my first book, someone said, and I was a little surprised, but not very, like I said, no ego. But they said they had a lot of trouble keeping track of where characters were. Not who's talking. It's just like, are they in this place or that place? And I thought, well, it's there in the text, but you know what? What the heck? Since because each chapter, I kind of like jump to a different group. So this group is, and then you're in hell, then you're in heaven, then But I would think that was obvious because I start off by saying where you are. But I thought, it wouldn't hurt if every chapter, right at the subtitle, I put where you are, and I did that. And I said, because it really wasn't a sweat. And I thought, you know what? When I finished this, it kind of gives a nice style to it for this particular book. So I did like it. So yeah, but there are times where I've had people say, oh, you should remove this little section. And I thought, well, if I did, I won't have the payoff punchline joke later on. So sorry, it's got to stay. Maybe I'll rewrite it a bit, but I got to keep the concept there. So yeah, I do listen, but again, I'm allowed to say it's not what I'm aiming to do because this is in the end my work and my craft. But yeah, so it's a mix. It's a mix. You have to use your judgment, but you can't put your ego in it. You really have to. If somebody tells you they hated some part of it, that's their opinion, and it's a valid one. You may love it, and you may decide to keep it. But now you're aware that there are going to be readers that do not like that part. So
I think in my early days, I ran the gamut of fire. Now, I'm not talking about fiction, I'm talking about factual stuff, right? And our um, outline, if you like, was to include information that your average university professor didn't know, but be entertaining enough so that your 3-year-old will be grabbed by the whole thing. Now, that's a pretty wide audience to cover. And so we'd write a script, and it was for a series like new inventions and how things worked and all that kind of thing. And one of the guys was a nuclear physicist professor who was now not lecturing anymore. And they would tear my scripts to him, and another guy would tear my scripts to pieces. And I often had to, in the end, submit something that I didn't think was as clear and concise and interesting and informative. But I had to do as I was told, and I'm sure they probably knew what was best, But then they were the paymasters, and I just from that point of view, as you said, Richard, you can get knocked down. Your ego goes out the window. You focus on what you think the client wants. Now, you can't focus on what the reader wants on a fictional thing because some people like one genre and some people like another, and some people like large picture books. And anything with more than 17 words on a page has just got to floor them, and they're not going to take it anyway. So yeah, you take, as I say, I don't do it anymore with beta readers because I know, well, hopefully I know what my story wants, and if people don't like it, they won't buy it.
I think one of the comments was that as a reader or as a writer, leave your ego out of it. I'd also say as a beta reader, leave your ego out of it too.
yes,
That just because you read it and you have comments doesn't mean the writer has to accept them or wants to accept them or needs to accept them. So you provide your comments and your feedback, and then you let the writer do what they will with them.
Right. Also, I think it was Bertolt who brought this up too. If you are going to be a beta reader, you didn't say this exactly, Bertolt, but you were around it. Remember to make sure that your criticisms are constructive. And I don't mean positive, I just mean constructive in that if there was something you didn't like, explain what was, from your point of view, what it was. Maybe, rather than just, oh, I didn't like it. That doesn't help. You've got to provide more information. That's what your role is. So you're being objective. You're being informative. So.
Okay. Anything else? Lucinda mentioned when we were talking about the lone wolf versus being in packs, the idea that indie writers are not in competition with each other or shouldn't be in competition with each other. So I think that can transition to this comment. Indie authors should be supportive, but not to the extent of teaming up to attack readers or rival authors. They also shouldn't become a non critical echo chamber, blocking out criticism or anything negative. Um, the thing that jumped out at me there is not necessarily the attacking readers or rival authors, but the non critical echo chamber. One of the things that I think as indie writers we should be doing is supporting each other, but with knowledge and intent. And the example I'm going to use is I never promote another writer or a book unless I've read it. There are some rare circumstances where I've read enough, for instance, of Kevin Brennan's books to know that every new book he writes is going to be a good story. So I will promote something like that before I've read it. But it bothers me how willing some people are to just push anything from any writer, whether or not they've read it or not. And that just kind of plays into the non-critical echo chamber concept that yes, we should support each other, but like I said, we should do it knowingly and intentionally, and not just do it because another person is an indie writer.
There have been some horrific stories of somebody giving somebody a bad review, who in return then gets a whole load of friends to go on Amazon and give you 1 star review, which drops yeah. your. And I mean, that is just. I mean, if a book is that bad, even if I've read the first 2 and they're great, and number 3 sort of falls by the wayside, I won't make it public, even on social media, much less Amazon itself,
yeah.
or Goodreads or wherever.
I think some of the problem for me is how we're defining support, maybe, because like Mark and you said, you wouldn't support another writer if you didn't read the book, but does that mean like somebody says, "Hey, my new book is out," so you retweet it for them? That's supportive, but you're not saying you must buy this book.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think the support in echo chambers really what's sticking in my brain, because I think if every indie author were supportive, meaning they formed this echo chamber for another author, I understand the criticism of that, but I don't think it's that bad of a thing, because in the final analysis, in the end, it's going to be the readers who decide. So if every indie author says, "Oh, which we often do, keep writing," right? You want to encourage people to write. You don't want them to feel, because it's a problem in our field. I don't want to say industry because we're not, but in our field where people get very, down on their own work. And it helps to have people support, even if your work on a particular book might be middling, but that's okay, because the goal of the support is to keep you up there writing. All right. So that one may be middling, but the next one could be better. But the readers will be the ones who are more honest, whether they like it or not, unless they're family members. And then it depends, as you pointed out, then it depends whether it's a critical family member or not. But yeah, I don't know if there's if the echo chamber is that hideous of a thing. I think we're getting a little overhit with that concept of echo chamber, because you live outside of a chamber to begin with. So your indie authors might form an echo chamber, but the readers will not. Okay. So I having a little problem, because I could see what the criticism is and is valid, but I don't think it's that horrible a thing. And as far as like Lucinda and another comment in there, we're bringing up when you gang up on something, that's just a no. Do not do that. That's bad karma to start with.
Authors behaving badly.
I know there are published authors I vehemently hate because of their stands on particular issues, and how not just their stand, but how they go after people it's wrong to do that in general. But that just means I will block. I will never buy their books. But that doesn't mean I'm going to join a bandwagon and gang up on or leave like fake reviews or something like that. Just there's no call for that. If you don't like what an author is doing, do the reverse. Support where they think they're not supporting, or don't support where you think they are supporting. So, do use your actions for positive gain and not like mob mentality. I just don't agree with that. I don't know if I'm going off in too many different directions. It's because it seemed open-ended.
Yeah.
It was support and attack in the same kind of.
I think support's the wrong word. I think what I should have said was promote, because I support any indie author I come across. I support any person I come across who says they're a writer or they want to write, and I'm like, well, why aren't you writing then? And it's one of the reasons why I have read the manuscripts, dozens and dozens of manuscripts over the last 10 years for other writers, just to support them, to support their efforts. But in terms of publicly promoting a book I've never read, I just that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree there. I always, anytime I've written a review or said to online or anything, buy this book or just say I enjoyed it, I had to have read it. Yeah, I don't see a way around that.
Yeah.
Wait, just because my mind is, has to fill everything out. With the mildish exception that if an author, I've read 3 or 4 of their books and I love them and they come out with another book, I could still confidently say I like their work.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to reading their next one.
Yes, that's my Kevin Brennan example.
Yeah, just being, my brain has to sometimes dot every I, but not cross every T.
There was a case a few years ago where I'm trying to remember how it all worked. I think it started with some woman had written a book, and someone had like advanced reader had given it only a 4.5 out of 5 on Goodreads or something like that, not a perfect 5. So she got upset and went on social media attacking this person for not giving it 5 stars. And see, this is the nature of the beast. People responded by, I mean, they were legitimately thought, well, this is not the way to behave. But then people started organizing, like, I'll call them Twitter mobs, basically, to go and give her book 1 star or 0 stars or whatever it is without having read it, just to punish her for, I mean, admittedly, it was bad behavior by her to do that. And
Right.
I looked at that whole situation. I'm like, just everyone's wrong here. This is just bad. But this is kind of, this is also, I think, a bigger problem outside of just writing. But I need to be careful what I say. But this is the nature of social media, right? As you get in situations like this. Because, yeah, I don't even, when it says, what is the thing about, attacking rival authors? I don't know if I have any rivals. That'd be interesting if someday I get attacked by the anti-Berthold League.
You haven't seen the Berthold versus the World page on Twitter?
So yeah, I'm just gonna say that's a no. Don't be going
I know.
attacking people.
Yeah, rival authors is just an idiotic concept.
Right.
But in the early days, in the early days, the very first review I ever did was for somebody who ran a particular group on Facebook, and she had New York Times bestseller and Wall Street Journal bestseller. I was expecting something wow, and I read it and I thought, well, it's okay, but I wasn't that particularly thrilled. So, as I say, very early days, I go on Amazon and I give it 3 stars, right? Because I looked at what Amazon said you had to put for 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, and all the rest of it. She never forgave me. She's brought it up 3 or 4 times publicly that I only gave her 3 stars. But I was being honest at the time and I knew no better. So we do have to throw a bit of ignorance into the pile as well.
I think I had mentioned this in a previous episode on that. I don't, me personally, I don't see anything wrong with three, 4, or 5 stars.
Mhm.
I think that's fine. I get a 3-star review, and as long as I prefer if it's going to be three, write something there so I kind of know where you felt it failed. Um, but I did mention that if you're another indie author, and they've written something you don't like, maybe you just don't say anything. You don't go on there and put a 1 or 2 star. Again, readers will do that if readers, but as indie authors, now again, that, we've talked about it before. I don't think that's such a horrible thing, because we have it tough. We don't have advertising. It's mostly word of mouth. We don't have, or at least the advertising we do is small. So we need that cushion because, you know, published authors, the bigger ones have their houses behind them. The small ones are almost like us. They're doing their own promotion 99% of the time. But so yeah, I think, yeah, 3, 4, 5. Anyone wants to give me a 3, 4, 5? Go right ahead.
Well, I when I'm looking at a book on
Or,
Amazon,
or 4.5, I'll take that. You will not hear a bad comment from me, I promise you. Go ahead, Bertolt. So,
when I'm looking at a book on Amazon, I often find the 3-star reviews are the most informative. You can't, because the five
yeah,
stars will just be I loved it, it was wonderful. The 1 stars will just be I hated it, it was terrible. It's like, well, this doesn't tell me anything. The useful information comes mostly from the threes, maybe from the fours and the twos occasionally. So, and for that reason, I'm kind of, in a way, I actually would like to have more 3-star reviews because I'd like to hear somebody give nuanced thoughts on it.
I, I'm going to disagree with you on that point for one reason. I'm overall, yes. In fact, when I go look at product reviews, I always look at the 4 and 3 stars, whatever. I try to get a more honest review. And I think anything below that is somebody who might have a legitimate chip, but I have seen lots of 5-star reviews where people give a full write-up of what the book is about,
That's
avoiding
true.
spoilers.
Yeah. No,
I
you're
have
right.
only seen those with the 5 stars. Mostly, I should say only. Only is not a good word, but predominantly. So yeah, I would say you are correct in that you get a nice fair assessment at that 3 or maybe even 4. Like you're going to get a things about what they do like, but you kind of get a good review sometimes of what the book is about. So maybe look at those 5 stars too, because it's going to tell you just in that alone, man, this is the kind of book that you like reading. They may say, oh, I don't love it, but then you get down and this happens and that happens, and here's what the author was doing. And then I'll give you a little bit more insight. So I partially disagree with you there, Bertil.
No,
Come
it's
on.
I give you a 3 on it. No.
We all should be able to agree that the most helpful reviews are the 1 star reviews that say book was damaged.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love
Yes,
it. Oh yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh.
Book was damaged and Amazon refuses to hear my complaint. I
Yeah.
was like, all right, you gotta, in a way, I hate to say it, it's a killer, but in a way, I can't fault them because they're angry at, say, Amazon or whoever the
Yeah,
publishing
but
company is
They
for
need a
sending them
separate
garbage.
they need a separate
They need
system
it
for
separate,
reviewing
right?
that.
that's something
Right.
for the
Review
Amazon
review
complaint.
the provider and review about the author. So yeah, review the product and then review the provider. That would just that simple. That would go carry because there are things I've bought, products, regular products, and somebody gave it 1 star for the same thing. Box was damaged when it came in shipping, something like that. Or the delivery person left it in the front lawn or it got soaking right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. We've been going for almost 50 minutes, and I need to go soon. I just
Okay.
wanted to share this one little tidbit. We've talked about part of the problem we all have is that we're pushing books out into a world where there are more and more books and fewer readers. I saw something that claims that the publishing industry in 1980 published 45,000 books a year. in 2025 between indie authors and the publishing industry. It will be over 2 million. So we are now publishing almost as many books a week as were published in a year 45 years ago.
Is that, do you know if that number includes what they would call AI slop books? That
It just said traditionally in indie published books.
Right. I think you could, that's still valid because you could probably put that slider back to before AI slop started to be created. And you will see still that steady. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's because the access became easier. And also, I think I may have mentioned once in the past that my friend of mine's brother, best friend, wrote garbage intentionally, like these pamphlet-sized things, just because they were $1 a download. People would download it and then realize it was garbage. It was like, too late, I got you $1, and they made a lot of money like that. So there's that kind of garbage in that mix. So yeah, it's probably not accurately counting legitimate books, but yeah.
Anyway,
Um,
I just thought
yeah.
that was an interesting fact because we talk about it, and I don't know that we ever really had any specific numbers. But
Well, facetiously, maybe it's because there aren't as many readers anymore because everyone's busy writing. But
well, that's part of
no,
it.
no.
And well, I think that is part of it. Everybody who thinks they're going to be a writer can do it now.
I just saw an article just this week where some of the schools that ban cell phones reported that there are more kids in the library reading right now. Now, I'm not saying whether or not that's good, bad. I'm going to get into the issue of banning cell phones at schools, because you can go positive and negative. But I'm just saying, when people who have been grown up not reading a lot and then have the open time, they gravitate towards books. So I think the potential will always be there, but I don't know how we can, up it.
Can I know this is off topic altogether, but for any authors watching this our Zoom things, I would recommend a blog, if you like, newsletter called Writers Beware, run by Victoria Strauss. And she is excellent, and it's a good way of weeding out anybody who says, "Oh, I want to give your book lots of reviews, or we'll push it up in the rankings, or this, that, and the other." And funnily enough, the one this week was lots of people saying that they have received things like saying, reviews, free reviews. Then, of course, when you dig deeper, they're not free at all. And I've had I'd say on average about 10 a day, every day this last week. And I was quite happy to see that, well, not happy, but relieved in a way to see that these are scams, because I was getting so fed up with them. I was just delete, delete, delete.
Yeah, that blog has been around as long as I've been publishing.
It's
I
great.
want to put another little warning on that because before this, yeah, I would say definitely there's a lot of scammers out there. And I personally don't even want to consider hiring a group of people to read and review my book. There's something to me that bothers me. But for other authors and the authors you do, that's great. But be aware that things have already changed and are changing, where some of these people coming to you saying, we'll get readers who will review your book. I can guarantee you that those readers in many cases are going to be AI readers. And they're not even, it's just like they're getting your money for not even doing effort. So just keep that in mind. They're just running their scripts or whatever and have their dummy bots out there and they'll give you your reviews, but they're getting money from you saying, oh yeah, we get 300 readers or 200, 100 readers to read your book. No, they're not. Okay. Keep that in mind.
Okay. Anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay. Go forth and write.
This one thing, I'm very happy that in one meeting we mentioned wolves, and thanks to Bertolt, devil. Not saying why, that makes me happy. He was playing devil's advocate. I thought, yes. So, okay.
Subliminal book promotion.
Yep. I love that. Have a great week, all.
See you all later. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.